The story begins as the main character explains that it is the Eastern Allied Kingdoms 10 years later. To prevent the approaching ruin, he had chosen to become their sponsor. He admits that he never thought it would turn into something this big. Once a corporate slave grinding away 78 hours a week for a small-time company, he was now reborn as a noble in a fantasy world. He describes it as sounding like a good deal, and indeed, it was. The scene shifts to show him holding a book upside down, trying to read, muttering in confusion at what it says. He wonders why the words make no sense, and questions why he didn't get a free translation patch after being isekai'd. His maid, watching patiently, realizes his mistake and gently notes that he is holding the book upside down. The main character continues to explain his situation. To top it all off, his character trait is complete illiteracy. He has no special abilities whatsoever. As he narrates this, one of the maids politely asks if he has finished his meal and offers to assist him with his bath before he retires. The scene transitions to the bath itself. Two maids help the young master bathe, and the main character enjoys every moment of this new life. He internally thinks that this is what true luxury feels like, a beautiful maid feeding him and another helping him with his bath. Apart from having no clue where exactly he is, everything seems perfect. One maid reminds him that since the other young masters will be returning tomorrow, he should retire early for the night. Hearing this, he becomes curious about who those young masters are. The maid responds, referring to young Master Leo and young Master Antonio. Another maid adds that they belong to the prestigious Padillo family. The main character's thoughts freeze for a moment as he recognizes the name. The mention of the Padillo family feels ominously familiar. His mind races, and suddenly he pushes his face into the bathwater in shock. The two maids nearby panic and look terrified as bubbles rise from the water. He realizes something dreadful. He might be in psychedelia. The scene transitions as he narrates about Psycheia, the world he once knew so well. He recalls how back when he was a corporate slave, carving out small bits of time to enjoy games. Psycheia was a turn-based RPG he often played. No matter which route the player chose, the moment the five great sins appeared, wrath, greed, obsession, sloth, and pride, the kingdom, the nobles, and the cities would all begin their descent into ruin. Among them all, the Patio county stood out the most. Within that family were the infamous sons, Leo Patio, the king of debauchery, Antonio Patio, the king of drugs. They were known as scoundrel nobles, appearing only in a side quest before the main plot began. The story then shifts to the moment when the main character first arrived in this world. He remembers the instant vividly and realized that he knew this place from before. The game's rules resurface in his mind, reminding him of the side quest titled Investigate Patio County of the Asteria Kingdom, used to provide a massive amount of experience points in the game. Finally, the revelation dawns on him. In this world, his new identity is none other than Alan Patio, the third son of the Patio family, and one of the minor villains of the story. Alan is seen lying on his bed, tears streaming down his face, as he thinks to himself that he would rather be a corporate slave working 78 hours a week. He desperately wishes to be sent back. The lavish lifestyle around him feels meaningless when he knows he will be dead in 10 years. The thought consumes him. He feels this misery is even worse than when his pay had been withheld for 6 months. His chest tightens with despair. He wonders how he can be a transmigrator without a single special perk. Muttering to himself, he laments that the main characters in other stories always receive all sorts of cheats. Then, suddenly, a realization strikes him. A special perk. That's right. Knowing the events of the game 10 years from now is the same as knowing the future itself. He quickly sits up from his bed, determination replacing his sorrow. If he knows the future, then he only needs to eliminate the causes of destruction ahead of time. To secure a peaceful life as a noble, he resolves to perform the 5 great sins. He convinces himself that since they are still just children, it should be possible to change their fates, even though he himself is completely powerless. Time moves forward, and 2 months later, the scene shifts. Alan's personal knight, Evan, appears before him. Evan reports that he has rescued the orphans from the Eastern Orphanage, which had actually been a human experimentation site. Among them, he has entrusted the operation of the orphanage to a girl named Utia. He affirms his judgment was correct, praising her capability. Alan acknowledges him calmly. Evan hesitates for a moment, asking if that was meant as a compliment, since his lord's expression never seems to change. Alan admits that was true, then gives a desperate smile and tells Evan he is counting on him.
The rare smile makes Evan uneasy, as he mutters that he is not sure he will ever get used to that expression. As Evan thinks to himself, he remembers how his old face had once been so expressive. Meanwhile, Alan glances at his reflection in the mirror, stretching his facial muscles, thinking how it feels like the soul has not properly attached to the body's expressions. Evan exhales and thanks him once again for the compliment. Alan then explains to himself that in a game like Psychedelia, where betrayal is the norm, Evan is a rare gem of a supporting character who remains loyal until the end. That is why he hired him immediately the moment he found him. Evan soon brings up another matter, reminding Alan that the recent raid had them for the purpose of rescuing the girl named Utia. Alan confirms that. Evan remarks that he can understand why Alan placed his trust in her. Even after his long years as a mercenary, that child is anything but ordinary. She is so powerful that he cannot understand why she remained obediently imprisoned. He suggests bringing her to the mansion, insisting that there is nothing to gain by leaving her there. Alan acknowledges that Evan's point is sound, yet deep in his thoughts, he knows there's more to his plan. It might seem like he is wasting her power, but leaving her exactly where she is forms part of his strategy. He then reveals details about Utia Blodia. She belongs to the monstrous blood clan, one who wields the power of an indescribable otherworldly being through a pact. In the game, she becomes the Sin of Wrath, one of the 5 great sins, a monster responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths. But Alan believes that if she grows up in a peaceful environment, she will not join the side of ruin. He proudly thinks to himself that he has finally taken care of the first landmine.
The reason he left her there is to roughly assess her state and potential. With a cold and serious expression, he clears his throat and says that something like that is the case, though he notes that the time is not yet right. Evan is startled by the statement, repeating his words nervously. Alan then instructs him to make sure nothing about this operation leaks out and to ensure that the orphans receive generous support. Evan nods and confirms that he understands. Alan then hands him a letter, instructing him to deliver it to Utia. When Evan asks if the contents are important, Alan explains that it is a letter of greeting, written to calm her down. After the trauma of being experimented on, Evan is surprised by his lord's thoughtfulness, remarking that to think he would even write such a letter. He promises to deliver it safely. After Evan departs, Alan sits back and reflects to himself. He doesn't know if the letter will actually calm Utia down, but for now, he has to at least try. Hidden within the greeting is a true message, an explanation he had heard dozens of times during his repeated playthroughs. He recalls the words of the Archbishop from the game, who once said that the spell to befriend the monstrous blood clan would surely have a calming effect. The memory replays vividly in his mind. The Archbishop had cried out, commanding the Sin of Wrath to be calm, chanting, "Companion of darkness, tomb of light, one hope and one belonging." It was a key phrase that appeared during the Sin of Wrath storyline, a word or passage that held power. A brief scene shows Utia in a frenzy, mercilessly slaughtering people. Blood splatters across the floor. Alan remembers that in the game, this was the point where the spell failed and a battle began. But now, 10 years before those events, he believes it might not be too late to change that future. He sighs deeply, thinking that now that he has dealt with one of the 5 destruction flags, he needs to decide who will be next. Befriending a monster with a single phrase sounds ridiculous, yet considering her clan worships some otherworldly existence, it just might work. The minds of those who dwell in fanaticism are beyond comprehension.
The story then moves to Utia, who is seen reading Alan's letter. Evan stands nearby, tense and sweating. He can still sense the overwhelming demonic energy radiating from her. She appears strange, utterly devoid of emotion. Her eyes glow with a deathly glare as she notes that the one who sent the letter is Lord Alan. She wonders aloud why he has not summoned her to his side. Evan freezes in shock, his body trembling. He can barely speak, terrified as he realizes that visualizing demonic energy is only possible for those who've reached the master level. He stammers out that his lord had said the time was not yet right, repeating it nervously to appease her. Utia lowers her gaze slightly, accepting his words with a cold calmness. The camera focuses on the letter, revealing its closing words. "Keep this in mind. Companion of darkness, tomb of light, one hope and one belonging." Holding the letter close to her chest, Utia whispers that this is surely a promise only her master would know. She roughly understands his will. Evan, still fearful, slowly reaches for his sword, but Utia only smiles, her expression dark and eerie, as if amused by the entire situation. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Alan lies on his bed once more. He sighs contentedly, whispering to himself that it has been a fulfilling day, one spent extending his cushy life. As he looks up at the night sky, he thinks even the bright moon seems to be cheering for him. With that comforting thought, he closes his eyes, determined to work just as hard on the next one. In the next scene, Alan is seen in the library searching for a book. As he continues to look, a book suddenly falls on his head. Irritated, he mutters in frustration, feeling annoyed that there's nothing useful there. Finding a clue for the third boss is turning into a real pain for him. At that moment, Evan approaches and informs him that they have successfully rescued the second child he had spoken of earlier. Hearing this, Alan acknowledges it with mild interest, asking if Evan had been kind to them, perhaps extra gentle. Evan confirms it confidently, explaining that after rescuing them from the illegal slave market, they had treated the child well.
Then, the second son of the Count, Antonio Patio, enters the room and notices Alan. With a mocking tone, he remarks on seeing him there, surprised to find him with a book. He strikes Alan's head with his elbow, calling him an illiterate fool, and taunting that he had heard Alan has been learning to read lately. He demands a response, reminding him that his elder brother is speaking. Alan, filled with silent anger, thinks to himself how much of a pain Antonio always is, and wonders how the original Alan had ever tolerated him. He longs to fight back, but restrains himself. Controlling his emotions, he bows respectfully before Antonio, stating that it seems his elder brother wishes to use the study, so he will take his leave. Antonio steps on his head and smugly remarks that at least Alan knows his place. Suddenly, a knife is thrown toward Antonio's face, but it narrowly misses, striking the wall instead. The one who threw it is the eldest son of the Count, Leo Patio. Leo, cold and composed, remarks that the insects are causing too much noise. Antonio turns in anger, shouting in shock, but Leo warns him not to provoke him further, saying he does not wish to see blood so early in the day, and orders both of them to leave. Antonio, refusing to back down, grabs Leo by the collar and sneers that perhaps his brother should leave the stench of the rabble outside when entering the study. Leo swiftly raises his knife to Antonio's throat, his voice calm yet threatening, warning him to stop polluting the place with his drugs and get lost immediately. Watching this escalating confrontation, Alan feels a wave of irritation and quietly slips away from the scene. As he walks out, his mind analyzes the situation, recalling that the Patio family in the game had only been minor characters who disappeared early on, yet their influence and power in reality are far greater than he had imagined. He remembers that within this family are two scoundrel brothers fiercely battling for the family seat, one known as the underworld kingpin, the king of debauchery, the other the king of drugs, who runs a vast cartel. Evan soon escorts Alan away from the area, while behind them the two brothers continue their violent quarrel. Alan's thoughts grow clear. If he wants to live a peaceful and comfortable life, he must never provoke them under any circumstance. He decides to live happily as a weak and incompetent, illegitimate child, avoiding all unnecessary conflicts.
Alan sinks into a sofa with a sigh. Evan, standing nearby, mentions that the second child they had just rescued isn't exactly ordinary. Watching Alan, Evan wonders silently how someone like him, who seems barely capable of taking care of himself, had managed to uncover secret biological experiments and illegal slave markets just to save children. He can't understand the reason behind it. Alan lies tiredly on the sofa, murmuring that it's all so draining. Evan continues to observe him and comments that his young master is truly peculiar. He points out that Alan is sending the child they had just rescued to an orphanage as well. Alan simply nods in quiet confirmation. As he thinks to himself, Alan reflects on Evan's words that the child isn't ordinary. In truth, she is far more than that. She is a world-ending catastrophe. The child rescued from the illegal slave market of the Kalian Kingdom, the central nation in a union of several countries, is none other than Dios Mridaran. After being sold into slavery and passed from one hand to another, suffering endless abuse, she would later become the sin of sloth among the 5 great sins. Eventually, she would annihilate entire kingdoms in the most horrific manner imaginable. That section of the game had once horrified players with its extreme brutality. Despite her title, the sin of sloth had been a diligent monster who repaid any harm done to her many times over.
Alan remembers repeatedly warning in the game to treat Evan well. This hardcore gamer before him now has insane potential, a terrifying fate waiting to unfold. While sipping his tea, Alan calmly states that the reason he sent her to an orphanage is simply because the time isn't right. Evan then asks if the letter Alan sent to Lady Utia had been about the second child. Alan replies vaguely that it was something like that, just some friendly everyday chatter. He had mentioned that he had told her he was sending a troubled child and had asked her to take good care of them. Meanwhile, in another place, Dios is standing alone when Utia approaches him. She observes his state and remarks that he is broken. She notices the marks on his body, identifying them as the work of the black goat. With a strange composure, she tells him that the great moon has chosen someone like you and offers congratulations. She urges him to feel the power he has been bestowed with and to unleash what is rightfully his. If he devotes himself entirely to serving her, he can have his revenge. Utia extends her hand in friendship, but from her hand emanates a dark, negative aura that causes Dios great discomfort. Afterward, Utia takes out the letter sent by the second brother. She urges him to read it. She comments that, along with a simple greeting, I suppose I should now send her first reply.
The scene shifts back to Alan, who is buried deep in books, flipping through pages in frustration, muttering that he still can't find where the third boss is. His patience is wearing thin. Suddenly, Evan comes rushing in, visibly panicked. He exclaims that there is a huge problem. The second young master, Antonio, the very one who had taunted Alan earlier, is dead. Shocked, Alan freezes for a moment, his eyes wide with disbelief. The thought echoes in his mind, that scoundrel is dead already. Then the scene shifts to Antonio's funeral. Everyone attends, including Alan and Evan, standing among the mourners. The atmosphere is grim. Yet the Count, Antonio's father, arrives in an appalling state, high on drugs, flanked by two beautiful women dressed provocatively on either side of him. The two women cling to the Count affectionately, one of them running her hands along his arm, complains in a bored tone, asking when this will finally end, saying she is tired and impatient to return to bed. The other woman adds that she is hungry. Watching this disturbing display, Alan feels disgust rising inside him. He thinks how twisted it is, coming to his own son's funeral high on drugs with women hanging on its arm. He had known the Count was a corrupted man, but this is an entirely new level of dark fantasy depravity. His thoughts drift to Antonio's death. For him to die of suffocation so early is strange. The details of his death are different from what he remembered. In the game, after years of suffering, Leo had finally killed that vermin himself. And in the end, Leo had become the undisputed heir of the Patio family, the new Count Patio. He remembered how Antonio had once wailed dramatically about how much he had suffered to achieve that victory. Yet now, looking at the Count's face, Alan can see that his father wears a "what a windfall" expression, as if he had gained something rather than lost. Alan notices that grin and immediately concludes that the culprit behind Antonio's death is either Leo or one of Leo's cronies. Still, he reminds himself of his goal. All he needs to focus on is dealing with the 5 great sins. A year passes after Antonio's death. With the issue of succession resolved and Leo taking over the family's drug business, the Patio household gradually grows more peaceful. During that time, Alan's correspondence with Utia continues regularly, and the two become pen pals.
Evan are seen sitting together, eating quietly. Alan thinks to himself that steadily building this rapport with Utia will certainly prove useful in the future. Soon after, he opens a letter and begins to read. The letter mentions how Gina is excellent and loves playing, and that the dear child is growing up wonderfully without any issues. Reading the words, Alan smiles, commenting that they sound like such good kids. His eyes then fall on another line. The list of sponsors for the orphanage has grown again. He finds it strange that such a small orphanage keeps receiving more and more sponsors. Evan, noticing his expression, remarks that it is unusual, but still a good thing. Then he remembers something and mentions that they have received information about the matter Alan has been searching for so intently. Evan explains that the Information Guild has found a clue. Hearing this, Alan expresses relief, realizing that it must be related to the third boss. Finally, he feels a rush of satisfaction, believing he can soon locate that person. It is a perfectly peaceful and idyllic evening, the calm before another storm. Meanwhile, in another part of the kingdom, at a drug distribution hub known as Marikavuk, 2 members of the organization enter the area. As they walk inside, one of them remarks that the eldest Patio son is incredibly generous and that the rewards they receive are always amazing. The other replies that their organization has already grown to several hundred members strong and that their future looks even brighter.
But when they step further inside, their words freeze. All around them lie corpses, the bodies of their comrades, blood pooling across the floor in every direction. Shock overwhelms them. Then, suddenly, both of their hands begin to move uncontrollably on their own. Their bodies jerk as if possessed. Before they can comprehend what is happening, their hands, guided by an unseen force, thrust knives into their own throats, killing them instantly. It is then revealed that their bodies are being controlled from afar by Deos and Utia. Utia observes the scene with amusement, commenting that she had enjoyed today's puppet show as well. She notes that the list of sponsors to report has grown again. Deos, watching the massacre, questions the meaning behind these actions. He says that he does not feel pity for the victims, as they were wretches who ground up human beings to produce their drugs. Yet he cannot understand how this act contributes to his revenge.
Udia calmly responds that it is indeed meaningful. Everything happening now is merely the cornerstone, the foundation being laid for his return. She explains that when he finally arrives, it would not do for his place to appear shabby or unworthy. A sly smirk crosses Udia's face. Deos acknowledges her reasoning with quiet understanding. Then, using her power, Udia begins to rise into the air, her presence radiating energy that lifts Deos along with her. Her voice echoes with dark reverence as she declares that everything is proceeding according to his will, for their blue moon, she says, is his sword. It has been 2 years since Alan started exchanging letters with Udia. Time has passed quietly, and in that span, many things have changed. Meanwhile, Evan is looking for Alan. His steps are slow, his face weary from exhaustion. After searching around, he finally reaches the backyard and spots Alan there. Completely drained, Evan drops to the ground, breathing heavily, muttering that he is back and had found him in his backyard. Alan turns in surprise, startled to see him, and responds in his calm tone, acknowledging Evan's arrival. Evan, catching his breath, informs him that the fifth one has been safely sent to the orphanage. Hearing that, Alan freezes for a moment, his mind flashing through everything that had happened. During that time, he had managed to rescue all 3 remaining sins as well. He looks thoughtful, realizing how much effort it had taken. Trying to ease the moment, Alan hands Evan some sweet cakes and tells him to eat. Evan accepts with a tired smile, his words slurred with fatigue, thanking him with a cheerful yes and thank you. As soon as Alan throws the cakes toward him, Evan catches them like a happy puppy, eagerly munching them down as if he hadn't eaten in days. Watching him, Alan thinks to himself that finding the 3rd sin of greed had been a real struggle. But, thanks to his game knowledge, everything worked out in the end. Once he made Evan grind hard enough, all the pieces fell into place. He looks at Evan with a faint sense of relief. Appreciating the boy's effort, he tells him that he has done well running around everywhere, and that he can finally rest now.
Lying back in the grass, asks whether that means the orphanage missions are finished. Alan replies that yes, that is the end. Evan sighs deeply, his body relaxing as he lies flat on the field, saying it is a relief. Then, after a pause, he asks why Alan doesn't seem happy about it. Alan replies simply that he is happy, but Evan can't believe it. He says that Alan still doesn't show it at all. Alan gives dull expression, his face almost blank, but his mouth moves slightly as he points out that he is smiling. Alan looks annoyed, clearly unconvinced, and responds sarcastically, thinking that if that is what Alan calls a smile, that he must have never seen one before. Looking at his face, Evan thinks it seems like Alan is attending a boring tea party rather than celebrating success. Later, the scene shifts. Alan is now lying in the backyard staring at the sky. His mind filled with thoughts, he reflects that everything has gone even better than expected, smoother than he had imagined. The bosses of Psychedelia had once become the 5 great sins because of their tragic pasts. Even though this world is set in their past, before they awakened as sins, the odds of saving them all perfectly before those events were extremely low. He had been worried that he might end up saving them only after they were completely broken, but somehow fate had favored him. Breaking his thoughts, Alan asks Evan how the orphanage is doing. Evan, holding a letter in his hand, replies that it is the same as usual, running smoothly.
The children, who had once been like broken dolls, have started to brighten up quite a bit. Alan listens silently, then responds that if that is the case, they don't even need a caretaker anymore. He is genuinely surprised. He hadn't thought Uriyama would handle it so well. Maybe it is because of her background setting being attached to the orphanage, but he had originally assumed she would hate being involved in something like that. Looking at it from this perspective, Alan realizes Uriyama is actually a good kid too.
That, Alan feels a small warmth in his chest. It makes him happy seeing all the orphanage kids growing up properly. For some proud reason, he feels a sense of fulfillment he can't explain. He thinks to himself that all 5 sins are growing up so normally now. The difference in their environment has truly changed everything. Perhaps he realizes the right surroundings can heal even the most broken souls. Evan asks Alan when exactly he plans to meet the children, reminding him that he always says when the time comes. Alan hesitates and replies vaguely before stopping, lost in thought. Deep down, he admits to himself that he has never actually planned to meet them in person. Getting close to them could have been useful in many ways, but he can't forget how horrific their process of becoming sins had been. Even from the in-game flashbacks, their personalities had been extreme since childhood. Although he had saved them before they awakened, the thought of facing them still feels frightening. After a pause, Alan mutters to himself that maybe 5 years later would be the right time. Evan accepts his answer with a simple acknowledgement. Alan then thinks that for now, all he needs to do is build enough self-defense skills to survive in this dark fantasy world. Magic requires talent, and fortunately, this body has it. He begins practicing his magic, releasing bursts of energy from his hands, a faint light flickering across his focused expression. Evan, watching curiously, mentions a name that catches Alan's attention. He asks if the young master has ever heard of Blue Moon. The term sounds unfamiliar to Alan, who replies internally that he has never heard of it. Evan explains that it is a newly famous organization known for hunting down criminal groups, almost like cleaning up trash. It sounds like they're doing good work, but Alan doesn't remember that being part of the game. He assumes it is probably a short-lived event that had never mattered much. Evan continues, saying that apparently Blue Moon also kills nobles, which is why he thought Alan might have heard of them. Hearing that, Alan grows serious and tells Evan that starting tonight, he will sleep in the room next to his own. In a secret underground guild, a different scene unfolds. Pride Senzoleng, who resembles a cat in both charm and behavior, sits before the group and asks Itia for Blue Moon's activity report for the week. Otia responds by mentioning the north. Soleng, licking her hand like a cat, says she had taken care of everything. The slavers' heads were gone, and no one had even discovered who had done it. She praises the outfit Ryan had made, calling it amazing, and recalls how the victims had begged her to reveal her eye color, but no one ever knew. Greed Sinrin adds calmly that she had dissolved all the corpses cleanly, leaving nothing behind. Purity Sinlandon grins and says that the South is done as well. The illegal human experiment site and those annoying Avalon men had been crushed into bits, leaving not even a trace. Otia smiles darkly and says that everything is proceeding according to his will. They exist for the Great Moon. They are the secret cult known as Blue Moon, worshippers of the Great Moon. Dios then interrupts, mentioning that there is one problem. Under his will, everything should be perfect, so how could a problem exist? He reveals that Avalon's leader is the Count's eldest son, and that during the southern cleanup, they had discovered a dangerous directive. It appears that the Count's son is plotting against his father. Otia's expression shifts instantly, her tone cold and sharp with anger. Her dark, negative, bloody aura spread through the room, making the other sins tremble in fear. In her hand is a letter, and written inside are chilling words. After the aging Count dies, poison him quietly. Otia's voice turns cold and quiet as she acknowledges that the revelation is true. 2 more years pass after that. The Count of Padillo, Alan's father, is dead. The official cause is said to be a heart attack, but considering his heavy drug use before death, the truth is obvious.
At the funeral, Alan stands in silence, surrounded by emptiness. In the background, a few nobles murmur among themselves, whispering about Blue Moon. They say that Blue Moon had ambushed again last night, another total annihilation with 50 casualties. Hearing that, Alan realizes even the higher circles are beginning to take Blue Moon seriously now. And so, the Count's funeral, with not a single mourner in attendance, ends quietly in silence. After the ceremony, Alan and Evan leave together. As they walk out, Leo glances at them from a distance, his eyes dark with unspoken thoughts. Evan asks the young master what he plans to do now, reminding him that next year the eldest, or rather the first young master, will become the new head. Then, noticing all the luggage, he asks what is going on. Alan, while calmly packing his suitcase, tells him to pack up as well. They are leaving. Evan, completely shocked, stammers in disbelief, asking if they are leaving the territory entirely. Alan clarifies that they aren't leaving completely, only heading down south. Evan, still confused, asks if he means Road Mill. Alan confirms it, explaining he has planned to leave for the small southern village of Padillo territory called Road Mill. The two soon depart, their carriage rolling through the countryside toward the quiet southern lands. From a distance, Leo watches them leave, his fists clenched tightly in anger and frustration. In Road Mill, Alan and Evan live peacefully for 3 days. The days are calm and quiet. Alan cooks delicious egg toast and other tasty foods, sharing them with Evan as they enjoy the rare peace. After 3 days, they return to the Count's estate, only to discover shocking news. The eldest son, Leo, is dead. Standing at Leo's funeral, Alan thinks about how unreal it all feels. He can't believe he is back in this deadly place again. The death scene is completely different from what he remembered. Leo is already dead, stabbed through the heart with a blade. He wonders silently who could have done it, who had killed Leo.
Then a servant approaches, nervously trying to explain the cause of death, but accidentally makes eye contact with Alan. The moment their eyes meet, the servant panics and quickly apologizes for making eye contact, trembling in fear. Alan frowns slightly, wondering what is wrong with the man all of a sudden. Turning to Evan, Alan quietly asks if he has found out anything. Evan leans close and whispers nervously, asking if it could be that Alan himself is the one who wiped Leo out overnight. Alan freezes in shock at the suggestion. As he looks around, his gaze falls on the nearby servants and maids. The moment they see his expression, fear spreads among them instantly. They tremble and panic, terrified of the cold aura surrounding him, as if the entire mansion itself is holding its breath in his presence. A scene from some time earlier is shown, the day Alan left for Road Mill. Evan, sitting in the carriage, suggests to Alan if he is going to leave anyway, it would be better to go to a bigger city. Alan thinks to himself and immediately rejects the idea. He cannot do that at all. Road Mill is the final destination of his plan. He remembers that he saved the 5 great sins from their misfortune and prevented the future where the world is destroyed. Road Mill has no connection to the original story, and it even has the patio villa. Alan continues thinking to himself about how he could live like a noble lazily for his whole life. He thinks that Road Mill is the perfect place to live comfortably. After all of that thinking, Alan answers Evan that there is a good reason for everything. Evan responds in a different tone and says he is not falling for that anymore, pointing out that Alan always brushes things off when bothered. Seeing Evan's tone, Alan tells him to leave the matter at that. Alan and Evan ride in the carriage and leave the estate. Alan's older brother, Leo, thinks to himself that he might kill Alan and then decides he will not kill him. Leo thinks Alan is useless, whether he is here or not.
After their father's death, Leo considered poisoning Alan to take care of him, but since Alan said he would go quietly to the frontier, there is no longer a reason to kill him.
After a moment of thought, Leo wonders if things with Avalon haven't been going well lately. Leo looks at Alan and starts to call him annoying. Then Leo orders Alman to follow Alan's carriage from behind. Alman, who is Leo's lackey, asks if that means he is being ordered to kill Alan. Alman's unexpected question confuses Leo. Leo turns toward Alman and wonders why he is suddenly asking a question, since Alman is the kind of person who always follows orders without asking. He tells Alman that his job is to just do as he is told. At that moment, Alman stabs a sword into Leo's chest. Leo is shocked and very angry and asks Alman why he did it. Alman answers that he enjoys war games and that it has been quite fun until now. Alman continues explaining that Blue Moon operatives follow a creed taught by the Red Moon, so they move as it wields them. He adds that if someone tries to harm the Great Moon, they are permitted to move on their own. Saying this, Alman drives the sword deeper into Leo, causing severe bleeding. Leo collapses to the ground from the pain. Alman, with trembling voice, speaks as if addressing his subordinates and says that they will not let Leo get away with this. Alman tells Leo that with the words he just spoke, Avalon will now disappear from the continent forever. Alman calls it a pity and reminds Leo that the Great Moon gave him a chance. After saying this, Alman flees and leaves Leo wounded. The next morning, Alan wakes from sleep and says good morning to himself. Alan thinks that Roadmill is truly a paradise. A peaceful day begins for Alan. He thinks to himself about waking up when he wants and eating when he wants, finally able to live a truly aristocratic life. While eating toasts, Alan suddenly considers starting a toast business. Then Evan tells Alan that a message has arrived. Alan asks what it is. Evan reads the message, and Alan drops his food from shock. He is deeply shocked and thinks with surprise that his trial version of Paradise ended in just 3 days. The next scene shows Alan and Evan returning from Roadmill to the Patio family to attend Leo's funeral. Alan thinks that he is returned to the Patio family once again. Soldiers and maids act overly dramatic, which makes Alan wonder to himself. At that moment, Evan asks Alan if he has returned to the Patio family once again. Alan is shocked by Evan's question.
Thinks that he is now trapped in a simulation of continuously occurring crazy situations. He realizes that he has fallen right into the middle of it. Feeling nervous, Alan sits with Evan in a corner. Alan calls Evan over and begs him to explain so he can understand why he has become the mastermind. Evan, also nervous, replies that it is because Alan is the only one who benefits from the situation. Young master. Evan explains that since Leo was murdered after they left the estate, Alan has become the heir with a perfect alibi. Alan is deeply shocked by this revelation. Evan continues saying that Avalon is gone too, so there is nothing left to bother Alan about Leo's death. Evan then says with visible pleasure that Alan has become the mastermind of the Count's family, the one who commands assassins at the swordmaster level. Alan, watching Evan's happiness, asks if this is funny. Worried, Alan wonders where to begin to tackle the problem. He thinks that there cannot be any organization capable of wiping out an underworld powerhouse in an instant. He questions how such a force could exist. Alan reminds Evan that there was mention of an organization that hunts at dawn. Evan asks if Alan is referring to the Blue Moon. Alan answers yes, and asks whether it could be their doing. Evan reports that the Information Guild thinks it is probably not the Blue Moon. Evan explains that the Blue Moon never leaves a body, but they always leave a sigil. He adds that Avalon was apparently struck down by swords. Evan repeats that they described it as a picture of hell. Hearing this, Alan awkwardly accepts how he became a mastermind with the Swordmaster. Alan thinks that the Blue Moon did not appear in the game, and that the culprits cannot be weaklings who disappear before the original story even starts. He wonders who could be responsible. Meanwhile, the Bloody Queen Utia questions her subordinates about any traces.
Greed Sin Rin answers that they did not leave any. Pride Sin Sail Lang laughs and says it was just a ton of corpses. Deas Moran then appears and announces that they have arrived, reporting remaining Avalon forces as 486 standing just behind him. Purity Sin Ladon states that they cut them all in half and killed them, confirming the cleanup's brutality. Utia praises her subordinates for their energy and calls their work good and perfect. She smiles and reflects that the massive organization Avalon, which once held sway over the Asteria kingdom, turned to dust in just 5 days.
Ladon warns that the cleanup is not perfectly finished. Utia asks what he means. Puzzled, Ladon produces a file and tells Utia that they found additional nobles entangled with Avalon. He points out that the Alia Duchy appears to be especially deeply involved. Utia takes the file into her hands and studies it. She looks to the others and asks rhetorically if they already know what she is going to say. Deos and Seolong turn to Utia full of zeal. Ladon answers that he will take care of the matter quietly. Utia turns to Ryan and begins to ask if the Information Guild is keeping things clean. Ryan, who is in the middle of searching through a book, tears one of its pages and responds while holding it, saying that they are treating this incident as unrelated to Blue Moon. As Ryan tears out a few more pages, Deos uses his magic to make them float gently in the air and addresses everyone around him, declaring that since his own blood had struck first, this is not an order, for they are the sword. Hearing those words, Utia glows tense, her composure faltering, as she reminds that a sword doesn't think on its own. Blue Moon, she says, should only move under direct command. Turning to her subordinates, she speaks firmly, instructing them to keep that in mind, for he knows everything, and they must never let him down. Deos listens in silence, his thoughts clouded with confusion. He can't understand why someone like Utia, a woman of such overwhelming power, would feel anxiety and fear merely because she might be discovered. The thought lingers heavily in his mind until he finally responds with understanding, affirming that everything is for the Great Moon, for him. The scene then shifts smoothly to the patio household. After the deaths of his brothers and father, all the family paperwork and responsibilities have fallen into Alan's hands. The burden weighs heavily on him, leaving him visibly exhausted and frustrated. He reflects in his mind how after the funeral he has been swamped for an entire month, wishing only to eat, and lays around like any noble should. He thinks about how he has made plenty of enemies, but recalls that Leon's death was originally supposed to occur 6 years later, but because the deaths of his brothers altered the game's timeline, all the family affairs now rest on him, solely the heir. Soon after, 5 workers arrive carrying even more stacks of paperwork, meant for Alan, adding further to the mountain of duties that have already consumed his days. Alan, feeling frustrated, looks at the workers standing before him and wonders to himself why everyone has suddenly started working so hard when the Counts was still around. They would always slack off. His eyes filled with irritation sweep over them before he returns to his work.
Seeing that expression, the workers grow nervous and silently decide they will work even harder to please His Majesty Alan. As Alan continues, he thinks to himself that it must be because of the rumors about him being the dark mastermind. He only wishes they would handle things on their own. When the work is finally done, Evan is in the same room with him. Evan speaks, expressing astonishment once again at Alan's progress, saying that it is still incredible to reach the second circle. After only 2 years of self-study, he admires Alan's talent. Alan is seen practicing his magic as Evan continues, explaining that normally it takes about 4 years of guidance to reach that level, and that magic itself can't even be used without innate talent. Hearing that, Alan replies that he guesses he isn't doing too bad, then begins thinking to himself that he has been practicing hard lately, mostly for self-defense, since things have gotten tense. He notes that this technique also requires fine control over mana, but feels there is no point since it is only half-baked. He then tells Evan that he can't believe he is actually using magic in a fantasy world. At first it had been exciting, but once his plans were complete, there would be no more danger, and he would continue self-studying slowly. Yet lately, as self-preservation has become crucial, he has realized a terrible truth. His mana hole is ridiculously small. Overwhelmed, Alan cries out in frustration that nothing ever goes right. He continues thinking to himself, explaining that the mana hole one is born with is like an athlete's natural physique, and his is far too small. He reflects that if worst comes to worst, there is still a way. Just as he is lost in thought, Evan speaks again, informing him that he has finally received an invitation to the ball. Hearing about the ball event, Alan grows confused. In the next scene, Alan and Evan are seen entering the ball. Alan already appears tired, but still has to attend the event. He thinks to himself that it is a regular ball held in the southern part of the Asteria Kingdom for noble networking. Since he's about to become a count, he considers using this chance to build some connections. Evan notices how deeply Alan is thinking and asks what he is doing. Alan continues reflecting silently that building ties with other nobles is essential for a peaceful future. But before he can think further, the other nobles begin noticing him. As they see him, fear spreads among them, and they start distancing themselves from his presence.
He tries to greet one noble, but even that person, frightened, runs away with the others. Evan, treating Alan as if he were a child, comforts him gently, telling him not to be upset. Alan finds the situation strange, but had already expected something like this to happen. He tells Evan that he will be back, then begins walking toward the nobles to try talking to them himself. Evan watches his behavior with confusion as Alan leaves. While walking out, Alan thinks to himself that they will surely look down on him for being unrefined. Unlike the glory days of his great-grandfather, the current Padio family is known as the Eastern Degenerates. He moves to another part of the hall, picks up a wineglass, and continues thinking that he hadn't come there without a plan. He will use his secret socializing skills to charm them all. Approaching a lady, Alan presents the wine and comments that it has a unique flavor, especially its distinctive aroma, and that he would love to take a few bottles home. He smiles as he speaks, though the smile appears unnervingly creepy. In his mind, he reminds himself that a smooth smile is essential for good socializing. However, the lady looks visibly uncomfortable, finding him strange. Fear creeps across her face, and she quickly flees, saying she will ask her father to prepare some right away. Alan tries to stop her, insisting that it wasn't what he meant, but she has already gone. The woman then goes to her father and speaks ill about Alan, causing him more distress. Watching her from afar, Alan thinks to himself that nothing has gone according to plan. Evan soon returns to him and once again, treating him like a child, tries to comfort and calm him. Alan, trying to make sense of this situation, thinks maybe the lady was just a really shy noblewoman. Later, the scene shifts to a quiet dining area where Evan is eating and begins listing Alan's latest spoils. One piled-in thoroughbred horse, Panay tangerine tea, Banda forged metal, and Malentino specialty wine. Alan stands beside him, looking dejected. Evan adds that he had even studied wine diligently. Yet Alan, still disheartened, thinks to himself that the Baldio family has an even worse reputation than he had imagined. He remembers that after the rumor spread about him taking out those delinquent brothers, everyone began avoiding him completely. Networking had turned out to be a failure, and to him it even seems like they have grown more distant.
Feeling suffocated, he tells Evan he will go outside for some fresh air and asks him to stay there. As Alan walks out, a red-haired girl nearby quietly watches him leave. Out on the balcony, Alan looks over the night sky, thinking to himself and wondering where it had all gone wrong. Suddenly, a voice calls out, greeting him and asking for a moment of his time. He is surprised because none of the nobles had spoken to him that night, and now a girl has approached him directly. He wonders who she could be, but when he looks around, no one stands in front of him. Then as he glances downward, he notices a girl introducing herself below. She says she is Loria, the third daughter of the Duke of Alia. The name catches Alan off guard, and he greets her back. He recalls in his thoughts that the Alia family is one of the 3 great shadow powers of psychedelia, known as the Northern Degenerates. It figures, he thinks, that anyone approaching him can't possibly be normal. Still, he can't remember her from the game, and is certain he has never seen her before. Loria, looking troubled, speaks again, asking him directly to lend her his strength. Her words leave Alan stunned. She then continues, explaining that she is going to be assassinated soon. Alan reflects on how she once received her father's affection and had been protected all this time as the daughter of his father's mistress. But now the Duke of Alia has fallen gravely ill. Loria continues with a trembling tone, confessing that her sisters are planning to kill her. Alan's mind turns cold, realizing that everything is about survival. It becomes clear to him why he can't remember her. She had already been dead when the game began. With a pitiful expression, Loria pleads for help. Believing in the power Alan possesses, she begs him to assist her, but Alan rejects her request without hesitation. Loria tries to persuade him further, insisting she isn't asking for free help, offering half of House Alia in return for his support. Yet Alan ends the conversation curtly, saying that will be all, and prepares to leave. As he walks away, Alan thinks to himself that her situation is indeed pitiful, but it is already hard enough just to keep himself alive. He knows he shouldn't invite unnecessary trouble, even if he wants to help. Unlike the rumors, he doesn't possess any special powers. Falls with sadness, and as Alan looks back at her, he tells her something good will happen to her. Descending the stairs, he quietly hopes that Loria will meet a good ally who can help her. Meanwhile, hidden in the upper corner of the hall, Deos and Ryan have been secretly watching everything unfold. Deos notes that Alia has now approached the Great Moon. With a measured tone, he mentions he should inform the Red Moon that something good will happen to that one. But Ryan disagrees, saying it wouldn't be necessary. If their information is correct, Loria is the only Alia not entangled with Avalon, meaning she isn't one of Red Moon's targets. Deos finds relief in that, saying it makes things easier since all the other Aliens will be dealt with anyway. Ryan confirms that according to the Red Moon's command, their focus will remain on cutting off the information flow so that the Avalon incident will never reach him. As Alan walks alone through the corridor, he notices that the surroundings feel strangely empty, almost as if they were a barrier around him. Suddenly, a beautiful and seductive woman approaches him, greeting him with a charming smile. Alan wonders if that greeting is truly meant for him. For a brief moment, he thinks maybe he can finally form a friendly connection with the nobles. He greets her back, but as he looks closer, suspicion fills his eyes. He realizes he has seen that face before. It is Kalia Zenonia. It figures, he thinks, that anyone who talks to him first can possibly be a normal noble. He politely addresses her as Lady Zenonia. With a graceful smile, she remarks with surprise that he already knows her. Alan replies that of course he does. She is quite famous after all. In his mind, Alan recalls what he knows. The 3 great villainous houses of the kingdom of Asteria. In the north, House Alia. In the east, House Padio. And in the west, the degenerates of Zenonia. Kalia smirks at the mention of fame and teases that she is famous, almost mockingly. It is then revealed that she is the eldest daughter of Count Zenonia. If Patio is a gang, Zenonia operates more like a refined corporate-style syndicate. Alan thinks about his own situation, realizing he only needs some noble connections to help him live peacefully. For the sake of his sweet life, he resolves never to get involved with people like her. He bows politely and tells her that she is beautiful, giving her reason for his attention.
Deepens as she thanks him for the compliment, saying she would love to talk more and inviting him to continue. Alan replies that he would like that, but points out there are too many eyes watching them at the moment. Inside, he is desperately wishing to be left alone, hoping to slip away quietly. Kalia smiles again, remarking that he is just as the rumors describe, and says she looks forward to seeing him again before leaving. Alan stands puzzled for a moment, wondering what that strange encounter was all about. Elsewhere, Ryan reports to Desos that the information about the Avalon incident is being perfectly contained. Desos mentions a new concern. Someone has been observing them, a tale that can't be ignored. Outside, hidden among the trees, a figure is indeed watching Alan from afar. Ryan notes that there are no direct orders regarding this observer, so they will continue to watch and eliminate if necessary. Without delay, Ryan and Desos leave the area swiftly. The next morning arrives. Alan and Evan travel together toward the canyon. Evan asks if his lord is certain this time, pointing out that the canyon seems to be the place they have been searching for. Although it is broad daylight, the inside appears strangely dark. Amazed, Alan feels a surge of excitement, realizing he has finally found it, his real objective. Even the field effects match perfectly, confirming his suspicion that this has to be the place. As they enter the canyon, Alan mutters that if this one turns out to be a bust too, he would be depressed. But deep down, he is confident this time it is the real deal. Alan thinks about how, in the game, this place had been easy to find. In truth, the reason he has come all the way out here under a guise is because of the labyrinth in the south known as the Labyrinth of Whispers. It is said that if one solves the riddles in 8 chambers, they will earn a valuable artifact as a reward. Alan still remembers the entire walkthrough clearly. It is time for him to savor the joy of level 1 grinding once again. As he and Evan approach the main door, Alan is filled with awe. Seeing the entrance of the labyrinth in real life feels surreal. Even though he had once grown sick of this place in-game, it still carries a strange sense of wonder now. Looking around, he feels like someone had carved this entire canyon by hand. Evan, confused, asks how Alan knows about places like this. Alan casually replies that he used to come here often. When Evan repeats his words in disbelief, he realizes he is daydreaming again. Grinning slightly, he says he was only joking, mentioning that he has his ways, and urges Evan to move forward. Evan nervously asks him not to joke like that with such a straight face. Continue walking. They look up and see terrifying bats flying overhead. These creatures are massive and dangerous, their wings cutting through the air with menace. Evan grows tense, imagining that a single wrong answer to a riddle could cause those monsters to crush them flat. Alan remains completely silent, calm, and collected even in such a frightening situation. Evan wonders how his lord can remain so composed in moments like these. They have been together for 4 years, and he still can't figure Alan out. None of the missions they had taken were ever related to each other. They had paid off someone's debt, helped a slave, taken down an evil organization, delivered meaningless messages, and even saved an orphan. Yet despite never leaving home, Alan somehow knows everything about this place. Alan comments that he has gotten the riddle right, but the door won't open until the task is completed. Evan silently thinks that even so, following his mysterious young master has always led to something good in the end. Slowly, the door begins to open. Evan wonders what Alan is planning this time. As the stone door creaks wide, Alan, feeling nauseous, thinks that the door's movement makes him want to puke. He knows this place is brutal, but even so, he nearly sprains his neck trying not to look directly at what is inside. Evan exhales in relief, amazed that it is finally over.
Before them lie piles of glittering treasure, gold, silver, and gems stacked high across the chamber. Alan glances at it all and tells Evan to take only the black ring and leave everything else. Evan picks up a gold bar, confused why his lord is focused only on the ring that seems completely useless. Alan slips the black ring onto his finger, though it feels a bit too big. He tells Evan firmly that anything else would only bring trouble, and they should leave it behind. Inside, Alan is thrilled. He has finally obtained the constraint. With quiet confidence, he assures Evan that nothing dangerous awaits them on the way back. Evan nervously replies in agreement. Still uneasy, Alan thinks to himself that thanks to the walkthrough, this entire process had been easy. But suddenly Evan's voice trembles as he calls out to his lord. He asks if Alan had expected this too. The realization dawns that the piles of stones around the canyon are actually golems. In an instant, countless golems begin to stir, their eyes glowing as they prepare to strike. Evan's thoughts race. Unknown enemies stand before them, and yet he is determined to find a way to get at least his lord out safely. Alan, with calm determination, states that this time he will handle it himself. Evan tries to stop him, but Alan presses on, declaring that whatever Evan is planning, escape is their top priority. He notes that second-tier magic wouldn't be enough for this battle. Then, all at once, the golems attack. In the chaos, Alan activates the ring and commands the constraint to commence. The ring begins to shine brilliantly, and in a flash, Alan is transported to another place. A deep voice echoes through the void, declaring, "Fragment inheriting the great will of Nimarala. Speak the two constraints you can enact." Alan realizes that in the game, this part had been shown as a selection window. That same voice is now communicating directly with him. This is the labyrinth's clear reward, the constraint. As the name suggests, it is an absorption-type artifact that imposes restrictions on the user in exchange for power. Hearing the voice makes Alan feel more certain than ever that this is truly reality. He begins his declaration. The first constraint, he says, is that in all spell casting, the hand seals of Babalola will be absolutely required. The voice asks what he wishes to gain by setting this rule. Alan answers that he desires the power to twist the laws of the world a little further. The voice acknowledges and grants it. Alan forms another hand seal and declares his second constraint, that in all spellcasting, only the sacred words of Babalola may be used. The voice questions what he seeks through this, and Alan replies that his goal remains the same as before. The voice falls silent. Nervous, Alan wonders if he has made a mistake. He had even mimicked the skill icon just in case, choosing both seals and words as constraints, provided the highest possible magic attack power. He had mastered all the hand signs and phrases through repeated play in the game, so this has to work.
The voice speaks again, saying his choice has been accepted. It addresses him as a human who remembers the seals and mysteries of the forgotten great god, expressing gratitude to the one who carries on his will. Alan questions what it means by carrying on his will, but as the ring's light engulfs him, it is absorbed into his body, signaling that the constraint has worked successfully. The voice speaks one final time, declaring that it has always watched him, the inheritor of the will. Moments later, Alan reappears back inside the canyon where the golems are still preparing to strike. Evan shouts warnings, reminding him, again, that second-tier mana won't work. Alan begins forming a magic spell in his hands. The sphere of lightning that should have shone brightly remains faint even after he pours all his mana into it. No matter how much he trains, this is his limit. It is time to test the constraint and the price it demands.
Focusing deeply, Alan casts his spell. A powerful ball of energy forms between his hands. The ring radiates a blinding aura that spreads across the surroundings. Even as the ring transforms into a vessel of magic, Alan can still feel its weight lingering around his finger. Alan appears to be unleashing or absorbing a massive surge of energy or magic power. The atmosphere trembles as swirling blue-white light and electric sparks envelop him. Waves of energy ripple outward, giving the impression of immense spiritual or elemental power, likely lightning or pure mana. Then Alan begins to cast his spell beyond comprehension. The moment his energy completely erupts, the entire scene is consumed by blinding light and violent surges of electricity, suggesting an explosion of raw magical force. Amid the chaos, Alan stands tall beneath a blinding burst of radiant light, the aftermath of the immense power he just unleashed. His cape billows behind him as he raises his arm toward the sky, signifying control, dominance, and the completion of his energy search. The light above him expands outward like an explosion of divine energy, illuminating everything in its path. Then he casts another spell, creating blue lines across the sky, the grand aftermath of Alan's ultimate power release. The sight visually represents the sheer scale and destructive force of his energy. At the bottom of the scene, Alan stands upon a shattered cliff, his figure small compared to the colossal energy sphere above him. The glowing orb, surrounded by violent arcs of lightning, symbolizes a concentrated core of divine power. The massive bolts of lightning tearing through the sky and the ground illustrate how unstable and overwhelming this power truly is.
He casts another spell, announcing a linear diffraction. After that, he performs various intricate hand signs, releasing a torrent of powerful magic. Evan stands in shock as Alan channels his energy toward the horde. In an instant, his magic power strikes the horde, and the stone golems begin to crumble and shatter, one after another. Within moments, every golem is obliterated, completely leaving nothing but dust and sparks in the air. Evan, still stunned, can hardly believe what he is witnessing. He remains shocked, realizing that this level of power is beyond anything imaginable, muttering in disbelief that it's unbelievable. As they make their way out of the canyon, Evan turns toward Alan, his mind still reeling from what he witnessed. He wonders if Alan had been hiding his true power all along. His thoughts swirl in confusion, reaching 87% disbelief as he struggles to accept what just happened. It feels impossible to him. In his 15 years as a mercenary, he has never seen anything remotely close to this. He questions in disbelief whether that was truly second-tier magic. Alan confirms it was. Evan falls silent, unable to respond. Inside his thoughts, Alan reflects that even he didn't know about it himself. Strange symbols and fragmented thoughts flash through his mind, marked by uncertainty. He recalls that it wasn't this powerful in the game if he remembered correctly. In the turn-based combat system of Psychedelia, a spell could only be enhanced using a sigil or an incantation per turn. This time, however, his attack power had doubled. It had been a chain lightning spell. Using 4 incantations and sigils, it was strengthened over 5 turns. The stacked Thunderblades had been amplified together, forming a configuration suited for large-scale lightning magic. In exchange for the restriction that requires him to use a sigil and an incantation for every spell he casts, he has gained something else, something divine. He recalls an ancient invocation echoing through his mind. O forgotten mortal, who recalls the sigil and mystery of the great God, I offer you gratitude for inheriting his will. That must have been the reason why the magic was amplified several-fold, rising to unimaginable levels. Even so, second-tier magic felt like overkill. The result went far beyond his expectations, and even he was surprised by the outcome.
As Alan continues to ponder these thoughts, he finally reaches the edge of the canyon, with Evan following close behind. The battle's aftermath still crackles faintly in the air, the sky tinged with fading streaks of blue lightning.
Exhausted, Evan lets out a deep sigh, finally relieved that they have escaped. His voice heavy with fatigue, he feels the toll of the encounter pressing on him. Sitting down on the rocky ground, he murmurs that this ordeal was even tougher than fighting itself. The treacherous terrain, the relentless danger, everything about this dreadful place feels unbearable. He wonders in frustration who on earth designed such a place filled with torment and exhaustion. Alan simply responds with a quiet hum, his expression unreadable. As the wind brushes past the remnants of lightning still flickering faintly around him, Alan thinks to himself that the Whispering Labyrinth had another name. It had spread throughout the community through shared map settings and guidebooks. People said that the Palin Labyrinth was the same as the Whispering Labyrinth, a mid-level grinding zone in the game. According to the director, the labyrinth had an owner. Apparently, it was said that one could grind infinitely if they skipped the reward, and at some point it started being called the Labyrinth of Palin. Alan remembers clearly that it was created by someone named Palin. Evan, confused and weakened, barely understands what he hears. His dizziness makes him stumble, and Alan supports him, holding him upright and saying that they are heading back east. Evan, exhausted from the journey, mutters about the 3 weeks of hard work they have endured and mentions that there is something he wants to do once they return. Evan asks what it is, remarking that Alan seems more diligent than he had thought. Night soon falls as the two continue their way, Alan still supporting the weakened Evan. Under the dim moonlight, Alan reflects deeply on his earlier spells. He thinks that choosing a sigil matching the spell's element increases its potency, and picking the right incantation strengthens its properties. That was how the game worked. However, unlike in the game where the visuals stayed the same and only the attack stats rose by over 10%, this time, each sigil visibly altered the spell itself. Every incantation had an obvious transformation just moments ago. He wonders if, even though it is just a magic technique, his mana control might be exceptional enough to perceive those changes. Once his mana recovers, he plans to test it again. Either way, he feels that everything turned out well in the end.
8. After a long night, both of them mount their horses and begin their journey home. The air is quiet, the atmosphere calm after the chaos of battle. Not far away, hidden in the shadows, a figure watches them silently. Ryan sits upon a tall tree, the moonlight reflecting in her eyes, making them glow faintly. She jumps down gracefully and moves toward the canyon where Alan and Evan had been earlier. As she arrives, she notices strange writings engraved into the canyon stones. The glowing letters read, "The Age of Forgotten Outer Gods, the script of the Alanar Empire." The inscriptions shimmer faintly as Ryan places her hand on one of the stones. The energy within it flows into her, and she realizes something profound. Alan had repelled the invasion of the Black Ones and defeated Alakalaka, the devourer of his subjects' heart. Her thoughts echo with fragments of history. The Radiant Emperor, the Great Palon. She knows all of it because she was born under the Great Mission within the ancient library. She recalled that Alan had said the labyrinth was created by Palon. She had always known that the Bloody Queen differed from the one recorded in history, and that difference had told her something extraordinary was hidden here. The Great Moon itself had once called Palon a friend worthy of reverence. Moreover, the incantation he whispered did not even exist in the records of the ancient library. She wonders in silence who that man truly is. Ryan smiles faintly, acknowledging that everything the Crimson Moon had said was true. A sense of guilt washes over her as she admits within herself that she feels ashamed for merely following orders. At that moment, Deus appears. Ryan's eyes shift toward him, recognizing his arrival. He notes his presence and asks whether he managed to obtain the information. Deus, positioned above on a tree branch, responds coldly that he did not. The man in black had perished. His neck had suddenly twisted twice in midair, ending his life instantly.
Ryan's expression turns serious.
She states that she will have to report this for proper handling. Her tone remains cold and composed as she prepares to move forward with the next steps. The scene then transitions to Zenobia Count's house. Kalia sits calmly while sipping her tea. Her eyes narrow slightly as she remarks that it wasn't just a rumor after all. She remembers how his gaze had been so cold and unfeeling, just like the depths of the abyss. Her thoughts calculate precisely as she processes what she knows. Count Zenobia is both powerful and renowned. The sound of the teacup clinking against the saucer echoes through the quiet room. Yet Kalia finds something strange. Despite her limited specialization, people still find her famous, which feels odd to her. She mentions this, noting how unusual it is. Her father replies that it is simply because she is the Count, after all. Her father sits at his desk, writing a letter unaware of her actions. Kalia's sly smile deepens. She snaps her fingers, releasing a wave of dark energy from her hands. A black aura spreads through the air as she manipulates her father, bending his will to her control. She quietly assures herself that no one would ever suspect that she is the one truly running the house, while her father acts as a figurehead. The faint light flickers as she murmurs about a foul discovery, wondering how they managed to find out. Her mind races, realizing that even the spy she planted seems to have been detected already. Slowly, the truth becomes clear. The person secretly observing Alan earlier in the hall was none other than Kalia's spy. Moments later, a servant rushes in, calling for her attention. He addresses her as Miss Kalia and urgently tells her she should come to her room immediately without hesitation. She follows him. Upon entering, she finds the spy lying dead on the floor. The servant explains that the seal did not activate, meaning the spy must not have revealed the secret before dying. Kalia narrows her eyes and states that he must have deliberately placed it in her chamber. A faint smirk forms on her lips as a red aura radiates from her body. She lets out a low laugh, realizing the depth of the situation. She thinks about how they managed to find this out and admits internally that she has been caught off guard with a major weakness the moment they met.
Outside, Alan and Evan rest by their campfire. Both are exhausted from their journey, finally finding a brief moment of peace. Yet as Evan drifts into deep sleep, his loud snores fill the night. Alan lies awake, unable to sleep, his eyes fixed on the dark sky, while Evan's snoring continues beside him and disturbs Alan. He wanted a lazy, noble life. Instead, he's the unwilling center of a cult that annihilates kingdoms in his name, a reputation that makes dukes wet themselves, and 5 apocalypse children who think he's God. The moon above is too bright, too blue. Alan sighs, pulls the blanket over his head, and mutters into the dark. I just wanted toast.